Hello, 3537 Lab. Welcome to the pre-lab for Lab 4. This week, and during your pre-lab video, we're going to be going over some review from lecture. That's going to include central tendency and variability. And then we're going to go over a little bit of how to actually calculate these things in SPSS and then write them up like you would maybe in a research paper or simply to describe your data. So, like I said, we're in this video lab, we're going to review central tendency and variability calculations, align our scales of measurement in central tendency and variability. And in our in-lab, we're going to actually conduct descriptive statistical procedures utilizing SPSS, determine how to report those descriptive statistics, and then also discuss the assignment, which will be assigned next week. So, just as a little bit of review for our measures of central tendency, what are those three measures of central tendency? You can go ahead and pause the video if you want to kind of test yourself on those. So our measures of central tendency are our mean. Oh, I had to be able to write. Our mean, still not able to write. Mean, median, and mode. Mode is going to be our most frequently occurring observation. So if we have 5 data points and we have 3, 2, 6, and 4 as our data points, our mode is going to be 3 since we see that occurring the most in the data. Our median is going to be the middle number. And our mean is calculated by the sum of each individual data points divided by the number of data points, notated by X bar. Our median is not influenced by extreme scores, since we're just picking the middle number, while our mean is influenced by extreme scores, even though it's considered the true average and is most reliable and accurate. Between mean and median, they can both be calculated with interval and ratio data, but typically because of its accuracy, we calculate mean. There are instances when median is more appropriate, such as when we have outliers, which are going to be influencing our data more than they should. So we might use median when an outlier or a few outliers are present. So what are our measures of variability? Once again, you can pause if you want to go ahead and test your own knowledge. Our measures of variability are going to be our range, standard deviation, and our variance. Our range, that's basically how far apart our scores are from each other. That's our most general measure of variability. And you calculate range by taking your highest score minus your lowest score. Our standard deviation is telling us basically the average amount of variability there is in our test scores, and this is most frequently used, our standard deviation. If you remember from lecture, 68% of our data points actually fall within one standard deviation from the mean. Our variance is our average error between the mean and each of the individual scores. And so that's basically our standard deviation squared. Woo! Standard deviation squared. That's our variance, but we don't typically report that. Of our measures of central tendency and our standard or our measures of variability, most often reported is our mean and our standard deviation, and those are usually reported together. Below, we're going to do some calculations as a little bit of practice. So what I'll have you do right now is actually take a screenshot of my screen, or pause the video and pull up the PDF that's available on Carmen, and go ahead and work through these calculations yourself. That should be familiar. It's a very similar format to what you did in lecture. So I'll have you go ahead and do that, and I am going to go ahead and pause the video and work through those myself. Highlighted our important values after completing this chart. This is just for you to check your work. I've highlighted over here on the left hand side of the screen your range, your mean, median, and mode. I've included our deviance, sum of squares, variance, and also finally your standard deviation. And I've given you a little bit of information as to how I've got to each of these points. So if we move on, we're going to continue to align our scales of measurement, central tendency, and variability. So for this table, this is something that you might want to save to use both in lab and to study for your exam. I'm not sure. I think it could possibly show up on the exam, but it's definitely useful during lab time. So I'm going to go ahead and fill out this chart. You can screenshot it and fill it out as well. So for our nominal type of data, we are going to calculate mode. For nominal type of data, for ordinal type of data, we're going to calculate mode. For interval, we can calculate mode, and ratio. And remember, interval and ratio is all scale in SPSS. Median is going to be calculated not with nominal or ordinal data. We can't calculate median with nominal and ordinal data, but we can calculate median with interval and ratio data. Mean is similar. We cannot calculate mean with nominal or ordinal data, so that's our categorical and our data like our Likert type questions, but we do calculate mean with interval and ratio data. And standard deviation is also calculated only with interval and ratio data. So this is a chart. It might be flipped the other way around if you see it again, and possibly if you've already seen it in lecture, it might be flipped the other way around, but this is just so you can view it in multiple ways and really understand why we use each type of measures of central tendency and variability with these different types of data. And I think this will become more clear as we get into the lab and actually calculating these in SPSS. Next, I'm going to have us actually walk through how we would report measures of central tendency and variability when we're doing our descriptive statistics in SPSS. So our mean, median, and mode, and then also our standard deviation. How do we actually report those out after we finish the procedures in SPSS? Oops. So mode, that is reported as frequencies and percentages. So for example, if we have 8 females and 5 males in our data set, we can say that females, or n equals 8, semicolon, 61.54%. And we report that in parentheses with our little n italicized. And our males are n equals 5, semicolon, 38.46%. That's how we would denote that. To write it out fully, which are these 2 bullet points right here, and this is how it's going to look when you actually go into lab and you actually report your lab descriptives for your assignment. So something that you could say to report or describe those statistics that you've just found is, within the sample, female participants, n equals 8, semicolon, 61.54%. Outnumbered male participants, n equals 5, semicolon, 38.46%. So we're writing this out with words so that somebody reading can understand, but then right after that, we're also including our actual data, our numbers, so that the reader of the material can actually say, oh, well, I know female participants outnumbered the male participants. I know that, but then by how much? So we always report our actual statistic right after we write out our data. Another way you could say this, you don't have to, it's not exactly reported in the same way every time, is that the majority of participants were female. So when we say the majority of participants were female, we then have to denote, okay, n equals 5, there were 5 females, and that is equal to 38.46%. So we're always reporting the actual statistic right after the sentence that we've written in parentheses with our both our actual number and the percentage. So if we move on to median, we typically do not report our median. So this is one that you're really not going to have to worry about that much in lab. We don't report it. Say our median was 83. We can simply just say the median exam score was 83. When you're reporting mean, you'll notice that mean is always reported with standard deviation. So you'll report your mean to 2 decimal places. And if you're talking about a population mean, you're going to use the large italicized M. If you're reporting your sample mean, which is what you're most often going to be doing in lab, you will use X bar for the sample mean. And once again, round those to 2 decimal places. Directly following the mean, you'll report your standard deviation, rounded to 2 decimal places. And again, this is what the whole situation is going to look like right here. So you report your mean equals 64.56, semicolon, standard deviation equals 5.04. So in written form, to describe this whole statistic, you could say the soybean varieties within the field trial, this should say trial, averaged 65 bushels. It's okay to round for simplicity, but then once again we report the actual statistic right behind that sentence in parentheses with our italicized big M and our italicized standard deviation. Our variability is typically not reported, so you are not going to have to worry about reporting variability in lab. And that is the end of the lab video.